There's a part of me that says the regular season went like this, and then there's a part of me that's like, damn, I forgot that had happened. Welcome to a brand new edition of NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer. Mike M and Eric at home with you. All right, Eric, we're finally here. There's some teams that are thinking about coaching searches, general manager searches, what we have in the NFL draft, and then there's a select group of teams that are thinking about the postseason, and that's our focus today.
And look, this is as good a lineup as I think we've had in a while, Mike.
Yeah, no, it is. And let's get right to it. In your rankings, no change at the top. I know Kansas City had lost, but I think this is a hat tip. Respect that you're giving this squad. Didn't play most of its starters, despite the fact that they got dominated by Denver. We'll talk about the Broncos in just a moment. The Chiefs, big-time flex on Sunday Night Football at 2. The Bills at 3. At 4, we got some questions about some rust for Jalen Hurts. But his Eagles are sitting in that 4th position. We'll talk about Philly in just a moment. The Ravens seem like they're surging at 5. The Vikings, regroup time for them at 6. The Commanders at 7. And the Packers at 8. All right, the Lions, they move up one spot. There's a part of me that says, not that many people were doubting them. I mean, look, they're a 1 seed. They got a first-round bye and the whole thing. But I think we had questioned what we could get from this squad because of some of the injuries that they have had over the last few weeks, specifically on the defensive side. Are we finally at a point where after a win against Minnesota, we just stop doubting them?
I don't know about stop doubting him, but certainly that is slowed down to a crawl at best, right? And they're going to enjoy that week off to get some of their guys healthy. They earned it, right? I mean, with a defensive performance, the likes of which I don't know that we've seen this year. You know, Aaron Glenn came up huge, especially in the red zone, really flustered Sam Darnold. He was only 2 for 11 for 7 yards passing down in that area of the field. I don't think anyone thought 9 points was possible. I mean, they played pretty well a couple weeks before against the Bears, but different level of accomplishment here. You know, I thought the 2 sacks were really big too, and they had constant pressure all night. So this certainly answers a lot of their questions. Now they can get some of that defense healthy, maybe get David Montgomery back. We'll see on him. And each game, each week they go farther, you know, those questions start dissipating pretty quickly.
Yeah, you name-checked Aaron Glenn, who put on a great resume tape, if you will, for a head coaching job. I know his name has popped up, NFL.com, for all the latest of what's happening in terms of those searches and who's interviewing for which job. But we'll get to Minnesota here in just a second. But let's just kind of reset here. We know that Detroit has a 1 seed. They got a first-round bye. We know Kansas City won't be playing this upcoming weekend. Let's take a look at the schedule here. Wild card weekend. It's the AFC kicking things off for us. We got a doubleheader on Saturday. We'll talk about all of these squads. We got Chargers and Texans, Steelers and Ravens on Saturday. Then on Sunday, it's the Broncos and Bills. Philadelphia will match up against Green Bay. Remember, no Christian Watson, ACL injury for him. Washington and Tampa Bay, a sneaky good matchup. And then on Monday, it is the Vikings and the Rams that will go head-to-head at SoFi Stadium. All right, we got the Bills, and I think there's been, I don't want to say the good vibes have leveled off, but I don't know how else to describe it. They were like the surging team. Now they got a Broncos team. There's a part of me that wonders if this is actually a good matchup for Buffalo. The way the Broncos look to close out, maybe it's recency bias, but I'm like, all right, maybe a little tougher than I had anticipated heading into this one.
Yeah, remember, they beat Buffalo at Highmark Stadium last year. I know things have changed dramatically, quarterbacks and other things, right? Who was even running the offense back? That was before Joe Brady took over. But you're right. I think, you know, as explosive as this offense is, we know 30 touchdowns plus rushing and passing has never been done before. They have that incredible explosive ability and balance. So that's what they've got going for them, no doubt. But Denver's defense is tough. We've also got the Bills defense, I think, has to answer some questions. We remember the Rams game giving up all those points. Detroit, too, storming back to try to make it a game. You know, even their backups defending Joe Milton last week. So there's a question about depth, even with Matt Milano back. You know, Greg Rousseau's playing well, but that secondary, I think, has to step up. One big thing they have going, rookie quarterbacks have not fared well against Sean McDermott defenses. Only 7 touchdowns, 17 interceptions in 13 games against them. So maybe they've got something against Bo Nix, but we'll see. It should be a good matchup.
I like where you're going with that stat with regard to McDermott and his defenses against rookie quarterbacks. Bo Nix doesn't feel like he's a rookie. These moments haven't been too big for him. We'll talk about the Broncos in just a moment. The Eagles, they match up against the Packers. That's Sunday, 4:30 Eastern time. I'm a little worried about Jalen Hurts, right? Like the latest news that I saw in the press conference from Nick Sirianni, like the concussion protocol, he hasn't cleared it just yet. Even if he does, we're talking about 2.5 games he hasn't played, two and three quarters games really that he hasn't played. How much concern do you have about the Eagles in a postseason run?
Yeah, there has been some murkiness over his situation, or quietude. Anyway, we haven't heard a lot of tangible updates. Mike Garafolo, our colleague at NFL Network, has reported he thinks he's not worried that Hurts will play, but the rust factor you mentioned is something to consider, right? There could be some gamesmanship here about Hurts' availability and all that, but he's got to get some reps in, some practice, and sort of get that rhythm back because look, you miss time, you get away from things a little bit, and then that timing gets thrown off. So, Saquon Barkley rested, offensive line rested, those are good. But when you've got question marks surrounding Hurts and Kenny Pickett, he had his ribs looked at a couple weeks ago, that's a little bit worrying for me. So this is also a Packers team that played them pretty tough. Again, way back in week 1 and way down in Brazil. A lot of things have changed there too. But, they've got some interesting questions facing them in their first playoff game.
And forgive me because I've read a million different articles on NFL.com. I believe it was you that also pointed out Tanner McKee would be sitting in that number QB2 spot assuming Jalen Hurts is ready to roll. By the way, analysis on all 32 teams on NFL.com. You can check out Eric's article as we go through some of these power rankings. The Ravens, is this a hot take? They should be the favorite to win the Super Bowl this year?
I mean, look, I think they're almost in a better position than they were last year. Not in terms of home field advantage and all that, right? Better record, better team all around, I think, last year. But still, they went from having the spotlight on them, all the questions about can they win it again? Can Lamar win his first Super Bowl? Now, the spotlight's been shifted elsewhere. They're the hunters now. They're in a different role than I think they're used to. Everything that started with 0-2 kind of put them behind the 8 ball and losses to the Browns and Steelers. But they came back in the second matchup against Pittsburgh, looked far better. 6-3 on the road, 3 close losses. And I love the direction of the defense, Mike. We can talk until we're blue in the face about Lamar and Derrick Henry and there being, this kind of year. The magic has been there. They're made for this time of season. But the defense has really made strides. I think the last 7 games, they're averaging 262 yards per game allowed. So they don't give you much. And they also take a lot from you, too. So they're absolutely rolling, and you could see them as the favorites, and it wouldn't be anything I'd really challenge you on.
Yeah, and look, they match up against the Steelers team. There's a part of me that says, well, division opponent, they know each other. They've already played 2 times. They split. I'd make an argument it should have been 2-0 in favor of Baltimore, the way that first game had played out. Pittsburgh, we're going to dissect it here offensively, some real issues. One other note from a Baltimore perspective, you used the term murky to describe the situation around Jalen Hurts. I'd use the same term to describe Zay Flowers right now, dealing with that knee injury. Still, his status for this game up in the air. Once again, Saturday, 8 Eastern time, those 2 teams will go head-to-head. The Vikings. All right, take a deep breath. Let's calm down. 14 wins, nothing to sneeze at. I know it's weird to talk about a 14-win squad as a 5th seed. Do they just go back and say, hey, outlier, we were in the red zone within the 10-yard line multiple times, and we just didn't execute? Maybe Sam Darnold wants a couple of these throws back like that one to Justin Jefferson. We're going to be okay?
I think Kevin O'Connell, I think, has done this sort of equanimity thing all year, not too high, not too low, understanding the pulse of his locker room. And it was a hard fall from 9 straight wins to what we saw Sunday night. That said, I think what's gotten them there is that day-to-day and game-to-game consistency. So, yeah, I think they'll go back. They'll rep the heck out of RedZone, make sure they've got that down going into L.A., a team they lost to this season. So, it is a little bit concerning that Darnold had his worst game and the offense had its worst game of the season, arguably, anyway. Maybe Cam Akers, former Rams running back, could have a little, he gave him a boost for that big long run in the second half, 58-yarder. Maybe he's a little more of the game plan in this one as they try to kind of balance out a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the Rams coming up here, who, not to give too much away, but do sit in the 12th spot in your rankings. Vikings, the 6th spot. That game will be played Monday, once again, right across the street from our studios at SoFi Stadium. A little home field advantage for Los Angeles. The Commanders and Bucs. How different are these 2 teams that we've already seen match up in week 1?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Commanders, right? You can talk about the Bucs and everything they've been through, and even getting displaced after Hurricane Milton certainly, sent a shockwave through the entire organization. But they've picked themselves up by the bootstraps. But the Commanders, right? I mean, just the design of the offense, I think, was still in its kind of early stages. We saw them in Week 1, and there were flashes, but I don't know that Jaden Daniels was comfortable yet taking the shots and making those deep shots with his arm, taking opportunities to run with his leg. I think the design and the playbook has sort of opened up since then a little bit. They've become this dangerous team that I think people now fear going against because of Watson. So, it's good, or Daniels, I should say, rather. It's going to be fascinating to see how he stands in this playoff atmosphere against a Bucs team that I think is sort of brimming with confidence. They've been able to pull off some wild victories too. But you're right. I think a lot has changed both offensively and defensively for both teams since then.
Eric, I always say that you get the toughest job in the building because ranking these teams is not as easy as everyone thinks, because I know for me, the recency bias is a real thing. Momentum is a real thing. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about the Green Bay Packers. I'm like, oh, world beaters out there, primetime game after primetime game, and it's win after win. Now, all of a sudden, I see a Week 18 loss, and I know Jordan Love wasn't out there for most of that game. Malik Willis actually played pretty well. All of a sudden, doubts are creeping into my head, and I have a problem removing the totality of an entire season when I'm thinking about just the short term and what I've seen recently.
Yeah, no doubt. You have to factor in recency bias, especially when it comes to injuries and things like that. Now, I suspect Jordan Love's elbow will be fine, but you saw him continually trying to kind of warm up and get it loose on the sideline. So maybe it was a funny bone thing. Maybe it was something a little worse than that, but I expect him to be out there. Yeah, you're right, though. I mean, even not too long ago when they lost in Detroit by a field goal, I said, look, this is a very good football team. I know they've lost some close games to good opponents. Hang in there with me. Well, you got to keep hanging because we haven't seen the best version of the one that messed up a punt against Chicago and allowed them to run it back for a touchdown. Matt LaFleur had clock issues at the end of the game. The offense was sort of sputtering. They lose Christian Watson. So, yeah, the questions are starting to mount for a team that not long ago I would have still put as a dark horse sort of Super Bowl contender. Right now, they've kind of got to win me back a little bit, I think.
Yeah, we were running boards on NFL Network. I think we even flashed it on this show, 3 weeks ago? There was still a path for them to go and win the division. They needed a lot of help.
That's right.
We're sitting here and it's kind of like limping into this. And I know you made reference to Christian Watson. There's a lot of questions on both sides of the football, not only for Green Bay, but Philadelphia. I think that's a hard one to dissect for a lot of reasons. But we're just getting started here on NFL Power Rankings. 6 teams we haven't talked about. They're playing this weekend in the postseason, the best of the rest. That's coming up next. Back here on Power Rankings, Mike M and Eric at home with you, and Eric's teams 9 through 16. The Chargers, all of a sudden that offense is rolling. We'll talk about them in just a moment. At 10, it's the Buccaneers figuring out ways to win. The Broncos at 11, all of a sudden look like a really dangerous team. The Rams at 12, Steelers at 13. Where is this team's offense? And are the Texans at 14 an under the radar team considering what we thought of them heading into the season? Bengals missed the postseason at 15, and the Seahawks also on the outside looking in at 16. All right, the Chargers. Think about this. We spent most of the year talking about this team in the playoffs led by their defense. Last 3 games, they've all been wins. 34, 40, and 34 points, respectively. Are they becoming a more complete team that legitimately could not only beat Houston, but also advance past them?
Yeah, I think it's key for them to get their run game going. If they obviously, it didn't happen really Sunday, and it did sort of fall on Justin Herbert to bring them back, and a key turnover kind of got them going after all those field goals. So you worry about them kind of bogging down in the red zone too much. And then again, when you see big plays in the passing game to Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, these guys have really stepped up this year. The tight ends, there's been 3 or 4 of them who have really contributed. So, and then Herbert, he would not have done runs like this against the Raiders. Long run to set up a touchdown early in the season when his foot was bothering him. I think he's healthy now. That's a huge development. But where's the offensive line? Rashawn Slater hurt last week. Other guys' depth is a little question. I still have my worries heading into this game.
Yeah, have to go on the road against the Texans squad that also kind of like Baltimore, right? In this, and I'm not comparing the two teams. I think Baltimore's path is way easier because I think they're a better football team. But I just think questions around the squad and maybe can start surging late in the year. They played a bunch of games in a tight window there, including that Christmas Day matchup. Who knows? We'll see. I know they were hyped up in a meaningful way. The Buccaneers at 10. I think they are the most disrespected team in the AFC or NFC playoff picture. They figure out ways to win. They've been a staple in that division, winning it. They got year in and year out. Baker Mayfield's balling. Like, I don't know, Eric. Like, am I crazy to think they can make a run?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously this is a very tough first matchup, right? I think a lot of people are sort of eyeballing this game as maybe the sleeper of the weekend or however you want to call it. But, you know, Mike Evans got his 1,000-yard season, great celebration on the field. And Baker's had a tremendous year, obviously throwing the football, more trust in guys like Jalen McMillan there. You know, Cade Otton, we hope he's healthy for the playoffs and ready to go, you know, and their offensive line in good shape. Plus the Bucky Irving factor. Boy, that has sort of changed the dynamic of this team as he's taken over a little bit more in the backfield. Been a huge development as a fourth-round rookie. He and Rachaad White are a great pair. So the offensive weapons are there. Is the secondary ready to handle Washington's passing attack? Are they ready to take him on as a scrambler too? Those are my sort of biggest questions right now. But you're right. The fear factor they bring and the fearlessness with which they play, I think, are going to be huge factors in this game and possibly beyond.
Yeah, I feel like every time I think about the Bucs, the perception is, like they can get beat here. It's a home playoff game for them against the Commanders. I don't know. I think I like Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield at home. It is time for Power Moves, and it is presented by Energizer. Moving up 2 spots, it's the Broncos. So at that 11th position, I think about a Denver team and a Bo Nix player. Speaking of Washington, I know Jaden Daniels might be the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Bo Nix has got to be right on his heels. What's a formula for a road win for Sean Payton's squad?
Yeah, I think a great opening script, getting a lead. You don't want to play from behind at Buffalo. If Buffalo gets up 14-0, and I know last year in the playoffs they had a big lead on the Steelers before they fought back, but still, I think this team, if Buffalo gets up 2 scores, it's going to be a real tough ride. Yeah, they can throw the ball. Nix has been very efficient this year doing so, especially when he sort of plays within the confines of Sean Payton's great playbook. I think it works really well. Sutton's come on, you know, Vele, you know, even Troy Franklin. So the other thing I think is not getting away from the run too early. They often script up great runs early in games and then kind of forget about it later on. So I think that at least some semblance of balance will help them against the Buffalo team that at times had trouble stopping the run this year. So they'll have a chance. That defense is nasty. We know all about them. They can take the ball away. They can sack you. Pressure is a big part of what they do. But I think offensively, they have to be productive early in the game, avoid turnovers, sustain drives, keep Josh Allen off the field.
I know besides their respective fan bases, generally speaking, I think a lot of folks wanted to see Cincinnati sneak their way into the postseason and grab that wild card spot, right? Like they don't, and it's Denver. I don't know, a week ago, I would have felt maybe with the majority, and that's see a Bengals team in the postseason. There's a part of me that says, you know what, let's see what Bo Nix can do on the road. I actually like this matchup. At number 12, it is the Rams. At their best, Eric, I think you can story this team getting to the Super Bowl when they are completely healthy and they are rolling and that offense looks as good as it can play. And yet I've seen some hiccups on that side of the football. Legitimately, what is this Rams team as they match up against the Vikings?
Yeah, obviously they've got to limit the pass protection problems, especially if you know you're going up against the Brian Flores defense that loves to bring pressure, overload blitzes, lots of extra hats at Matthew Stafford. When he's at his best, obviously he could beat the blitz, and those receivers are pretty fine too. And you know, both those guys, Kupp and Nakua and Kyron Williams, all had very productive games against Minnesota last time, so we know they can obviously ring it up offensively. But you're right, we've seen some fits and stalls, offensive penalties, O-line issues. They've all kind of contributed. And again, same thing we were talking about a minute ago. The Rams sometimes will deviate and get away from their run, sometimes later in games too. I'd like to see them stick with it and be able to finish off a Vikings offense that you know, Sunday night notwithstanding, can be pretty darn good.
The Steelers, they drop 3 spots. They sit at 13th in your rankings. It's 4 straight losses, and offensively they look lost. What has happened to this team?
You know, George Pickens comes back and didn't get involved on Sunday. You know, certainly the blocking up front and key turnovers down the stretch from 2 guys you don't normally associate with Russell Wilson and Pat Freiermuth. Both guys had crucial either drops or turnovers that have cost their team. So there's just a lack of rhythm right now. And you see Wilson having to get a quarter and a half, 2 quarters to kind of get his feel for the game. And by that point, sometimes it's too late. They put themselves in a hole. The defense has done what it can, but even in the bigger games, the marquee matchups, the best teams they faced this year, even they can't hold him on that side of the ball. So they've got a lot of worries heading into this game, and you can see it on Mike Tomlin's face and in his words.
Yeah, this is not going to be a good matchup or an easy one to try to solve a Baltimore team that's surging. The Texans, we thought about them as a dark horse Super Bowl team before the year started. Is there at all a chance?
Well, look, they beat the Browns in Houston last year. They were underdogs at home, too. And look, C.J. Stroud can still bring it. I know the receivers have been hurt, the offensive line. Joe Mixon's been out of the lineup, but maybe they've been able to save it up and store it up for this one game. And we'll see. They need it badly because all the momentum has been going the other way.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there's one team that has consistently been in your bottom 5 of the power rankings for most of this season, Eric. And yet there's one of our colleagues who thinks they're going to be a playoff team next year. Who that is and what Eric thinks, that's coming up next. Back here on Power Rankings, teams 17 through 24. What happened to the Arizona Cardinals, who do move up 2 spots? But man, we were talking about them maybe winning the division just a few weeks ago. They're at 17. The Dolphins at 18. A lot of questions around that squad. Atlanta was on the precipice. They're at 19. On the outside looking in, though, the Colts at 20. The Cowboys 21. The Niners will finish out the regular season ranked 22nd. The Bears 23. And the Panthers 24. They move up that 1 spot. Cam Wolf, who's one of our great reporters, I was doing a show with him yesterday, and he turned to me and he goes, hey, I think Carolina could be a playoff team next year the way Bryce Young is playing and how this offseason looks. Is he crazy?
I don't think crazy at all. You could absolutely see a path for them, provided they add a little bit more firepower on offense. I'd love to see him bring Adam Thielen back. He's been a great mentor for that receiver room, and guys like Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker and such. Maybe add a tight end. And when you see that no-look pass, though, from Young, you know he feels comfortable. This is Alabama version of Bryce Young that we're seeing, not the guy who looked miserable early in the year and was benched, and we didn't know what his future would be. So complete 180 from what we've gotten. You wish it happened for guys like Anthony Richardson, but maybe that's next year. Bryce's turn is this year so far, at least turning the page. And yeah, I could see it. Defense needs a lot of help too. So Dan Morgan and company have to get that side of the ball right. Otherwise, it's still going to be an uphill climb.
Yeah. Alabama, Bryce Young. Can I use that on a show? Can I
sure,
steal that
anytime.
Okay. Yeah, because you're right. It does. He has that vibe. It looks like he's having fun out there when he's playing it. And I know it hasn't always been wins down the stretch, but competitive in a ton of these ball games. Teams 25 now through 32. The Saints. Ooh, this is going to be a crazy offseason for really all of these teams. At 25, the Jets 26, the Jags finish at 27, the Raiders and Antonio Pierce and company at 28, the Patriots, they're going to be looking for a new head coach at 29, the Giants won't be looking for a new head coach. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, their general manager, keep their jobs. At 31, it's the Titans, and the Browns finish out the season ranked 32. Tennessee moves up 1 spot. Here's the silver lining. They get the number 1 pick. I don't know who's making the call on it. Ron Carthon, their general manager, just relieved of his duties. Is this all about QB1?
I think the duty of whoever is hired as GM is going to be, is there a quarterback worth taking at 1? And the question they have to answer before that, is there a veteran quarterback who could possibly step in and instantly give them credibility? On the one hand, you see Brian Callahan here. Obviously, he was in Cincinnati. He was part of the Joe Burrow drafting process, got to see it from soup to nuts, understands how that would work. Burrow wasn't necessarily considered a classic number 1 pick prior to that college season. So, they might go off the radar and take somebody who wouldn't necessarily be a traditional number 1 overall guy. But I think if there's a veteran option, they'll at least explore that. There's so many questions in Tennessee about defense, offense, and obviously now the front office as well. Wow. Who's going to be making those calls? We just don't know right now. They and the Browns, I think, have two really tough situations. That's why they were 31st, 32nd on my list.
Yeah, look, I was doing a show and Brian Baldinger said, hey, 6, 7 of the top 10 teams picking in the draft need a quarterback. There's not 6 to 7 first-round quarterback arms
Agreed.
This year. Free agency. There's going to be some movement this offseason. Cannot wait for this weekend's games. Eric, you're the best. I'm Mike Yam. Thanks for watching.